Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the perspective of former Trump administration official Fred Fleets and his take on the conflict with Iran. Now, his view is really different from what you might be hearing in a lot of mainstream reports, so let's break down his key arguments. Okay, so let's get right into it. At the absolute core of what Flights is arguing is this huge gap, a canyon, really, between the common media narrative and what he sees as the reality on the ground. The big question he's asking is, who is actually winning here? So to really get a grip on his thinking, we're going to deconstruct his interview in four key parts. First, we'll look at his raw assessment of the situation. Then, we'll get into the administration's stated strategy. After that, we'll see how he defends all this under the America First banner. And finally, we'll explore what he sees as the potential endgame. All right, first up, how does Fleets actually see the state of the conflict? He claims that his intelligence-based view is, well, completely at odds with what a lot of us are hearing and seeing in the news. And this slide right here really lays out the contrast, doesn't it? On one hand, Fleet says the media is painting this picture of an Iran that has the upper hand, that America is on its back foot. But his assessment? It's the complete opposite. He claims the regime is devastated, its economy is in total ruins, and its ability to project power has been, in his words, wiped out. So you gotta ask, right? Why the huge difference? Well, Fleets points to something he calls moral defeatism. He basically describes it as this mindset where he believes some in the media and on the political left want to see President Trump fail so badly that it actually shapes their reporting. Leading them to amplify what he considers Iranian propaganda. And it's not just about the external pressure. Flights really hammers this point about the internal situation. He argues the Iranian regime is facing this incredible pressure from its own citizens, who he says are just completely fed up with living under a government that's not only oppressive, but also deeply incompetent and corrupt. Okay, so that raises a pretty big question, right? If Iran is already in such a bad spot, why did the US and Israel decide to act now? Let's dig into how Fleets explains the official strategy and, maybe more importantly, the timing. Well, according to Flights, the whole operation really boiled down to two clear objectives. Goal number one, laid out by President Trump, was simple: make sure Iran can never, ever get a nuclear weapon. The second goal, which Flights says was put forward by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, was to stop Iran from building a sophisticated missile shield that would make any future military action basically impossible. And this is the key takeaway here. It was all about timing. Fleets argues this wasn't some random decision, but one driven by a real sense of urgency. He believed there was this very narrow window of opportunity to act before Iran's missile technology got so good that it would slam that window shut for good. Now, of course, this kind of military action has drawn a ton of fire. And not just from the usual opponents, but from some of President Trump's own former supporters. So, the big question is, how does a major intervention like this fit into an America First doctrine that's all about ending foreign wars? Flichts dives right into this criticism, especially the kind coming from commentators like Tucker Carlson. They're essentially asking, hey, isn't this the exact opposite of what you promised? Isn't this just another forever war? And Flichts lays out how President Trump himself answered that question. The argument goes like this: America First absolutely means keeping the US out of new wars. But, and this is a really big but, it also means you have to stop a hostile regime like Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, because that's seen as a direct threat to America itself. And this quote, which Flitt shares, pretty much sums up the entire defense. He recalls President Trump saying something to the effect of, look, I came up with this concept, I decide what's in it. It's basically an assertion that, as the author of the doctrine, he defines what it means. And in his view, stopping a nuclear Iran is central to America First. So in the end, Fleets really just dismisses these dissenting voices. He says, yeah, they're loud, they get a lot of attention, but he claims they're at the margins, and that the vast majority of the president's base actually understands and supports this action against Iran. All right, last part. What does a win even look like from this perspective? Fleets looks way beyond the immediate conflict to what he sees as the massive global ripple effects if the US and Israel pull this off. So, from his point of view, a win here isn't just about neutralizing one threat. He's talking about a fundamental realignment of the entire Middle East. You'd have an Iran that's no longer run by what he calls a hateful Islamist terrorist regime. He argues this would weaken China and Russia's influence, and at the same time it would supercharge alliances like the Abraham Accords. It's a huge vision. So really, when you boil it all down, the ultimate stake here, as Fleets lays it out, isn't just about regional stability. It's about a potential transformation of the entire global balance of power. And the question he kind of leaves us with is this: could a fundamental change in Iran really be the domino that reshapes the world stage?